I'm good.
Everyone
How are you?
should have on their desk a one-page document with a little map at the bottom of the fire department. Chief Brown is going to go over the sheet. I asked that we not interrupt, let him get through his entire presentation, take notes, write your questions down, and I don't want to leave here with unanswered questions about the fire department's proposal. Once the fire department presentation is over and we've got through all the questions, I hope we will have time to start talking about what our recommendations as a committee are going to be to the council. I don't think we're going to get through all that today. So I also, while you're sitting here intently listening to Chief Brown, start looking at your calendar and see if you want to meet again tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of next week. Because July the 11th, Judy and I have to go stand before the city council and give a presentation on our committee's recommendation. So with that, Chief, back to you.
First of all, welcome once again. Cannot thank you enough for the amount of time, dedication, study, care, and the input that you've given in this process. We're extraordinarily excited to be moving forward. Extraordinarily excited about some of the numbers that have been hypothetically bandied about. Those are very exciting things. I cannot begin to express how much that lightens our spirits, how much that gives us hope for the future, how good it makes us feel for the care, the dedication, the appreciation that you've shown. So thank you. Thank you very much. Today will be a little bit different. I don't know about y'all. I'm sick of PowerPoints. Y'all are probably even more sick of PowerPoints. So we discussed a little bit. We thought we'd do this a little bit less formally maybe. And we'll just kind of walk and talk our way through this program that we presented for you today. So we were instructed or asked to come up with 3 options to kind of take all that information, that tremendous amount of information, distill that down into something that we could actually sink our teeth into, something to wrap our heads around. We're asked to come up with 3 options, and we're asked to include an option that included basically renovation only. It does include a little bit of addition, but we'll walk through that. So moving along, Chief Kiplinger, City Manager Kiplinger, excuse me, Mr. Bartlett, Chief Self, and I put our heads together, went over the concept drawings, the plans for the drawings that were provided by the architecture firm, BRW. We took those plans, those concepts, and really drilled down, sharpened our pencils, and said, these are wonderful. How do we decrease costs? How do we save taxpayer money? How do we still achieve the goals that we need? And it boiled down to number 1, downsizing. As we move through this, you'll see that we have cut square footage from the stations that were proposed by BRW. For example, if we co-located 2 and 5, that was originally programmed for 21,000 square feet. Our iteration is down to 18,000 square feet. The substations, if we were to build a new one or a new 3, those are originally programmed at 9,200 square feet. We've dropped that number down to 7,500. The main ways we did that were cutting an engine bay. Each station had, I believe it was programmed originally for 4 engine bays. We figured that we could do probably very well with 3 engine bays. And if we still needed that storage area in a substation, we could probably store boats and things that aren't coming in and out of the doors every day in an area that's cheaper to construct through an 8-foot ceiling, a 10-foot ceiling, versus a 19-foot ceiling and a heated area that a normal engine bay would encompass. Additionally, we went back through with that real sharp pencil looking at spaces inside the buildings. We cut some offices, we cut some storage area. We were careful because we do have to plan for the future. We don't want to build a station that's outdated 5, 10, 15 years from now. We want to be able to have room to expand so we don't find ourselves somewhat the same place we are now. But we were able to cut some square footage there. Some of the areas were eliminated, some of the areas were just downsized. And again, we're working with concept plans, but we think we've come up with an idea that's good. If you notice, the substations are listed at about 7,500 square feet. We didn't come up with that, off the top of our heads. We looked at Station 3 on the South Loop, which is a pretty good sized station. The station's poorly laid out. Certainly could be arranged much better, but that level of square footage we can work with. So that gets us around that 7,500 number. Station 3, I think, is currently 7,100 and change. So that gives you an idea of the size of the station. Unlike Station 3, the new station would have room for growth, room for expansion. If we did have additional firefighters down the road, we would be able to house those people properly. So, along those lines, we have to come up with some priorities. What are the true driving factors besides cost? Cost is important. It's a big one. But what are our priorities? And so, not in any particular order, the safety of citizens and firefighters. Actually, that is in order. That's number one. The people we serve and taking care of our own. And so, in that line of thinking, we were considering real-world response. Is the station in the optimum location? Is the station functional? Does it work for the firefighters coming in and out of that every day, over and over and over, and the safety of the site? Number two, and these are splitting some fine hairs, manpower. Our options include, or option 1 and 2 include addressing manpower. As you may remember, we wanted one of our goals to be never having less than 3 firefighters on an apparatus. Option 1 and 2 address that. Number 3 is carcinogen and biohazard protection for firefighters. And as we talked about quite in depth, our stations have a lot of that, but certainly are not at peak performance for those things. Number 4 is response time, travel distance, and associated ISO impact. And number 5, again, certainly not last or least, is stewardship of tax dollars. Being mindful of the fact that every decision we make, every dollar we spend, is a dollar coming out of the pocket of our taxpayers. We're extraordinarily conscious of that, and I'm trying to reflect that in our decision making. So if we move through to option 1. Option 1 is merging 2 and 5, building a new station 1, building a new station 3. Those funds would come from a bond election, hopefully. Renovating station 4, doing that out of pocket with either cash reserves and or ARPA funds as possible. Bottom line price tag on that is $16,730,000. So what does option 1 achieve for us? We go back to those priorities that I just talked about. It achieves all of them. It is the most expensive, but that margin is small, as you can see compared to the others. That achieves the greatest safety of our citizens and our firefighters. The optimum locations, the functionality of the stations will be increased. The safety of the sites, we could dictate some of that. We're not having traffic issues like we might have at Station 1 in its current location. It is the most expensive, but as you can see, relatively speaking, it's a small number of disparity through any of these options. Option 2 is to merge Station 2 and 5 to remodel Station 1. The plan there is to preserve a very small portion of the existing building that's still considered solid. It's indicated as the pre-72 part. That part's solid. We would maintain and renovate that. And then we just listed it as an addition where they're slicking off, demoing the parts of Station 1 that aren't salvageable and rebuilding around that, but currently keeping it located at its current site. Option 2 includes Station 3. That's moving it. And again, the primary driver there is to address the ISO impacts, the real-world response times, and to avoid the potential for increasing insurance costs. So, priorities we achieve with option 2 achieves many of our priorities, but not all of them. It increases safety for citizens and firefighters. That would allow us to have 3 firefighters per apparatus. It does address the carcinogen and biohazard concerns. Improves travel distance response time in some cases. May not help us out at one. It is the least expensive option by a small degree. What option 2 does not address, not relocating station 1, does potentially impact our ISO rating. It does nothing to improve the ingress, egress at that station. The getting in and out of our station off of North Street. The traffic impacts of being on one of the busiest corners of town doesn't address any of those things. And lastly, and this certainly probably is lastly, it's not the best and highest use of that property. That's one of the most valuable corners of town. And if we were to relocate the fire station, I think there's a better use there, as we discussed before. So option 3 is basically renovation only. Option 3 does include some additions at Station 2. Depends on how you look at it. The same renovations and additions at Station 1 are listed in option 2. The reason being there is simply too small. Y'all are familiar with it. There has to be additions there for it to be functional in a modern sense. So option 3 doesn't achieve a whole lot when you look at it through the eyes of our priorities. It does certainly improve the carcinogen and biohazard protection for the firefighters, but it does not address, does not increase functionality, the safety of the site, doesn't increase response times, does not help our potential ISO impact. And if you look at the cost, it is actually in the middle of these two, so there's no financial incentive purely for that option. That's the nuts and bolts of what I have. I know there are going to be questions about this, so let's walk it and talk it. Ms. Fanning.
John, is it time for questions?
You're ready for questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What was your A&E multiplier? Do you recall? I don't have my calculator to.
I'm done. Go, Mr. Bartlett.
The A&E, which was total of all consulting, was 15% of.
15%? Thank you. That would be bare bones.
That would be very much.
Yeah.
I used to work for 6 games, so what do you think?
Oh, is that right?
Other questions? Ronnie?
Chief Brown, just a question, I think you basically indicated this, but I'm going to assume option 1 is the recommendation of the fire department, fire group, yours, whatever you want to call it, that's your recommendation for us to move forward with.
That is correct, yes, sir. When dealing with realities and costs, real world costs, that is our recommendation, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. On option 3, remodeling Station 5,
Yes, ma'am.
how do you get enough room on that footprint to provide the safety separations, the zones for decon?
That's a good question. And if you notice, I believe when used purely as a renovation, the costs there are higher. That's indicative of 2 things. One is the design will be difficult to accomplish those things given the footprint. And that cost is also driven by the fact that that's a historical building. The demolition and construction and that's going to be difficult. It's my understanding we can still achieve those things, but it will be literally at a higher cost.
And my second question is, are there any differences between these options in the expected life of the building? Because if you're remodeling, are you getting like is it gonna have the same life expectancy as a new construction? Maybe you don't know
Mr.
that.
Barton, please tell me if I'm going right. My understanding with the depth of this level of renovation being much more than simply a paint and carpet and tile, that we would be able to get a very long lifespan out of this, with that 30, 40, 50-year lifespan out of those.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Station 1, would you move it more towards the northwest?
Correct. Bumping it northward, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you
Northward
have
or
property
northwestward?
already?
Northwestward, slightly northwestward.
You already have property?
No, sir. Yes, Mr. Bull.
Actually, it's not much a question or a concern.
Yes, sir.
Station 2 and 5 merging, and the concern is moving Station 2 out of a certain community.
Yes, sir.
And also, in regards to that, there's 2 subdivisions on Highway 21 East Main that have a concern that you're moving further away from response time for their.
Great. Those are excellent questions, extraordinarily valid. Again, we don't have a specific site selected. It would be inappropriate for us to do so. However, our analysis has led us to believe that any site that we utilize has to be east of the university. So it's going to be on that side of town. If we do, let's say we put it in the vicinity, as we talked about, of University in Maine. So we've moved it westward a little bit. It doesn't dramatically impact our response time. You're still right there hitting Main Street. You're able to move quickly going eastward on that 4-lane highway. Impact there would be minimal. Very minimal.
But if you said west of Main Street.
Did I say west of Maine? I meant east of Maine.
Oh, okay.
If I said west of Maine, I apologize.
You
East of
said
Maine.
west of the
East of
existing
University.
station.
East of University. I'll get it right here.
Barbara had a question. Barbara?
Yes, ma'am.
Me? Okay, on the, merging the station 2 and 5, you've got 18,000 square feet. And the largest fire station we looked at in Lufkin was like 7,000 or 8,000 square feet, their biggest one. And we, in our recommendation, we recommended merging 2 and 5, but leaving you downtown, so we didn't have to build such a large building.
Okay. Can't speak to Lufkin's operations. I do know that their administration is divorced from their fire stations. Am I correct, Chief? That's the path that they chose to do. Our thoughts were that we have one facility to house both admin and our ship personnel. Over time, there are some efficiencies there. There's certainly some operational efficiencies. That's what we think would work best.
And that's the
It's
difference.
just it's the cost, it's just, so expensive. And then on number, 1, that's the, station on North Street, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Across the top of that.
Okay, you're putting down $50,000 for land. Where on North Street are you gonna buy a lot for $50,000?
Well, the property, of course, hasn't been determined, but it would not be on North Street.
Well, where would it be?
Well, that's a question that we're not prepared to answer.
Huh?
That's a question that we're not prepared to answer publicly at this time.
It says in the notes that it would be in the vicinity of North Street and Parker Street and be
Correct.
reduced to it says that in the notes. Reduced to 7,500 feet.
It's a general location. That makes sense.
But we won't be locating in high value. In other words, just like, Station 1 at Austin, that's, may have higher and better use if you were looking at land value. So we do not have an intention. We've looked at some properties that will be off of North Street. Those are still under consideration, and these were values for those properties we looked at kind of average.
Mr. Cobb.
So if we move Station 1 north and we have a consolidated station that's moved further east, how is that gonna impact folks on Old Tyler, the west side of Douglas Road, Power Street,
Gotcha.
the Nettie Marshall area, that whole kind of part of town?
I think the answer there is also moving Station 3 as part of that process. We've owned Station 3, however you want to look at it, westward, northward, around the loop, moving Station 3 into there, filling some of the shortcomings that were incumbent with moving 2 and 5 eastward.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't know if you're able to do this, but can you guarantee that the new combined 2 and 5, if that's the recommendation that ends up being made, can you guarantee that it would stay in the community that it's in now?
It would have to, for the backbone of this plan to work, it has to stay in that area, yes ma'am.
Because I think that's important, and I think it's important to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes ma'am.
With option 1, R2, R3,
Okay.
our ISO would remain a 2.
We believe-
near as you know.
As
You
far
know,
as
you're
we
not
know,
the greatest.
Option 1 and 2, that gives us our best chances absolutely of maintaining them too. Yes, ma'am.
Because I think
Option-
that would be one of the things we would really like to see.
It is definitely a driver in our decision making.
Well, when you look at the ISO report, the thing they really dinged us on was personnel. So that's something we can address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely correct. That is probably the #1 area we were hit. However, and I've said this before, but I have to beat this drum. I won't forget. The next time that we are reviewed by ISO, station location will be 2.5 times as important as it was under the previous survey.
That's
So
interesting.
there's going to be a significant impact if we don't do anything in terms of relocating the stations. Ms. Carter?
I have two things. One is Mr. Bolden, yesterday, at yesterday's meeting, there were 4, I think, people from the Nottingham area in your board. And I know that, at least one of them said if we combine station 2 and 5, that she felt like because 3 people would be on an engine instead of 2, it would actually be a safer alternative for her, because once the fire truck got there, she was like, then they can actually start working instead of waiting for a second engine. So that is something that was addressed yesterday for that community specifically.
Mr. Collins?
Just kind of tag along with what Randy said. Keep in mind that the ladder truck will ultimately be located at this station of combination 2 and 5, so it puts it a lot closer to downtown.
Yes, sir.
If we need it, there, and most probably if we had some major fire down there, that ladder truck would be very, very critical to have.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing it up. The main drivers arguably of the ladder truck are downtown. Of course, the high rise is at SFA, so you might be asking why we're moving downtown. SFA is a fully sprinkled campus. Downtown currently is not. Having that down right there still would allow us to zip into downtown, and we can travel to the SFA campus very easily down University. It's a large 4-lane highway, not like North Street where it's very tight. We can travel quickly down that. The center lane there is larger, it's safer, faster to travel up and down North Street. Yes, ma'am.
With option 3, having an obsolete station, because that's one of the issues is those 2 are so close together. Do we have a number over the span of the next 50 years of how much an obsolete station would cost the city? I know it was addressed at some point, and I think it said 50 to 60 million, but I don't know if that was correct or.
I do not have that number. I think the 50 to 60 million is the projected cost of a station and manpower and everything. So I don't have the answer to that question. Mr. Blackburn?
Yeah, I was looking at the coverage. If the station at Old Lufkin Road in the Loop is moved to, say, the vicinity of South Fredonia in the Loop, it looks like the 1.5 mile buffer just barely gets up a little north of Durst Street. So again, I'm wondering what the increase in response time is going to be, because currently the station number 5 covers the west side of town. So if you move it further east, then its 1.5 mile buffer is going to be somewhere around the top of the hill, around where North Sanders and all that. So basically all the residential neighborhoods on the west side of town are going to be outside the 1.5 mile buffer of both the Southwest Fire Station and the new station at University Drive in Maine. So what would be the increase in response time to, say, an area like Oak Hill Plaza?
I think, and to kind of tag onto that.
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
answer.
This is one of those things where we have to balance real life with ISO requirements. It's understood we're not going to have 100% coverage per ISO. We have to balance that with what we can reasonably do, how we bus services, and how we meet ISO. So existing maps, proposed maps are going to have gaps in coverage. The nice thing about that paradigm, moving 3 north and west, is that kind of like University Drive, we have a loop and you can move very quickly. I'll give you an example right now. If a real world example, let's say there's a traffic accident right by 4 travel, for example. Both trucks at 3 and 5 are in the house, ready to go. Tones go off, those trucks come, we have to be extraordinarily careful because we get to the loop at the same time. Even though there's a pretty good distance difference there, the reality is the time running around the loop at 65, 75 miles an hour versus coming through downtown, that apparatus is able to reach those areas very quickly, a Station 3 apparatus.
So then, and then the other thing, going back to what we presented as a recommendation was the investment in the light system. You know, I think that's been talked about. What was the name of it?
Opticom.
Yeah, or the Opticom, that was one of the, I think, whatever that process is that.
Emergency vehicle preemption.
There we go, emergency vehicle preemption, that would, to your point, we would, if those times are increased, that's was part of what our recommendation was, that should be a part of the investment, so we help with the STEM times if there is gonna, and because it is gonna shift. Every one of these, when you talk about moving, things are gonna shift, so I would just remind that on our recommendation that we had made that the importance of investment in that for the traffic lights to help where they can.
Certainly.
Well, where the fire station is on the southwest loop now, at Old Lufkin Road in the loop, after the flyover is completed, they are gonna have access to a access road immediately. So I'm not thinking the difference in time between where it's located now and the proposed site is gonna be very significant. It's gonna be less than 45 seconds. And
We
I wonder what.
estimate that it adds at least, even with the turnaround, at least a minute. The information that we currently have is that we would be going.
I mean, to get to that
So,
northwest side of town, if you left from Old Lufkin Road in the loop versus leaving from South Fredonia in the loop, we're trying to estimate what the delay time is going to be to Oak Hill Plaza. I'm thinking that
would not be
it wouldn't be that significant compared to the difference in time to where the fire station number 5 is located right now. And I wonder what the residents of that area would think about that increase in delay.
Again, there's very little increase if any, I think, from a functional standpoint. The first in apparatus might be different. It may not be 5, it may be 3. But I've never had an assistant say, "Where's 5? I wanted 5. I got 3." I'm being somewhat silly, but I do think that's the real answer. That from a practical standpoint, there wouldn't be a tremendous impact in those areas. Yes, ma'am.
Does option 1 and 2 assume that those existing 2 and 5 will be abandoned and made available for sale or some other use? Or
Yes,
are you
ma'am,
hanging
and that
on
would be a
to-
decision for the city council to drive what is done with those buildings. Certainly they would, I don't know if there is a greater use for Station 2, but Station 5 is probably a better use for that. But again, those decisions would be made by council.
And I guess the same would apply to Station 1 on North
Yes.
Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think that's a good question for Barbara, the real estate expert, right? On Station 1, I don't think there'd be any problem selling that property if it moved, right?
You know, what they said one night, or one afternoon at our meeting, that I know we won't have any trouble selling it, that we couldn't put it on the market where you could get top dollar for it. You've gotta have an auction.
That's my understanding, and you get full disclosure that gets out of my area of expertise, but that is my basic
I
understanding
mean,
as well.
that's
Well,
not good for the
But you can
city.
set a minimum.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not an economic engine. It had a grocery store that went out of business, it had a 7-Eleven that went out of business, it had a Cash for Gold that went out of business, and now it's a half a sliver of what it used to be. So, I mean, Johnny's Barber Shop is not a going economic engine in Nacogdoches. I don't know if the car wash is, but they seem to be going out of business too. Walgreens seems to be doing okay, but they're a big company. So I don't know if there's that much economic potential in that corner.
Speaking of Walgreens, they're on the tax roll for 1.6 million. And the city tax on that's $8,200. So based on the cost of a new fire station at $4 million that we had from BRW, it'd take 450 years to recoup our cost. So as far as us as a city relocating based on the tax income that's gonna come in, let's say you sold it for $1 million, pie in the sky. It would take 300 years. How old's Nacogdoches? So I don't think we should think about moving a fire station in terms of what we're going to get in terms of tax off of what replaces it.
No, I think
agree
that's
with
just a
that.
byproduct, to your
Yeah.
point. I think that was,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't think
I'm-
anybody's talking about that, Philip.
Well, they've talked about how
Well,
expensive that lot is and how we need to get it on the tax roll.
By your own comments, and it's immaterial.
Yeah,
You know, the income increase is immaterial.
getting that on the tax roll is not something to consider for moving that station.
No.
Does a satellite station, the reduced cost one, give us enough space in the future for that, 4 personnel per shift
We
thing?
were very careful to plan for that, to take into account, current emergency operations where we might have snowmageddon, we might have flooding, where we're gonna have 2 shifts sleeping at the same firehouse, for example, or for growth. We did curtail some of the bedroom space, but we were very careful to plan to have sufficient extra for those emergency times and for growth that might happen in the next 20, 30, 40 years.
One more question.
No, please.
Are you requesting additional firemen this year in the budget?
I am not this year. No, ma'am.
Ronnie?
Yes, sir.
One question, and this kind of goes back to Mr. Bolton's concerns in regard to Station 2.
two.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah, 2. All right, so let's just say we combine those 2. Manpower is gonna be different at the combined station versus either 2 or 5, right?
Yes.
So if there were something, a fire of some sort, even though we may be a few seconds slower in response, we're gonna respond with a lot larger crew than we
Potentially,
would
absolutely.
ultimately by trying to get, I guess, 2 and 5 both there. Would that be somewhat fair to say that?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think my question to that too is and just yesterday after the open, I did not know this was another learning point for me, talking with Chief Kiplinger when the fire happened downtown in the 80s, when that whole section burned, that the fire station across the street still had to wait for the other fire station to come. I mean, I don't know, it painted a picture for me like, okay, here you are, the fire happened literally almost across the street, but that other resource still had to come from another fire station.
All
So,
fire stations
yeah.
responded.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, the minimum.
But
to get
having the
minimum-
station across the street from the fire didn't help any, because they couldn't do much other than go, holy crap, that's a big fire.
Right, yeah, that's right.
And I hate to say it, that's the same thing you got now.
Yeah.
You got that same thing right now.
Exactly.
And a few weeks later, International Paper burned to the ground, and the first truck there went, holy crap, that's a big fire, gotta wait for everybody else to show
I
up.
just didn't realize that. It would just painted a different picture for me to understand when you talk about the manpower piece. Yeah, the need for, well, all 5 to show up, right? But the 2 closest, you need the 2 closest to even get started.
That's why the
We
2
have-
in, 2 out is so important.
Yeah.
Again, anecdotally, kind of back to my Fort travel example of this, although this one's certainly real life or specific. We have a couple of frequent flyer fire alarms downtown, which is fine, it happens. And frequently, 2 and 5 are meeting each other. And again, 5's getting dressed at the station, they jump in their truck and go. And 2's breaking the rules sometimes because they're firefighters and they care. And so they're getting dressed in the truck, even though we'll yell at them for that. But they're moving and getting ready the same as they're coming, and then putting their seatbelts on like we firemen. But frequently, their arrival times are virtually simultaneous. Perhaps not literally, but from an effective standpoint, they're simultaneous.
I have a related thing, it's not directly related to this, but, I think we've got to think about the future. It's been mentioned several times that we're in some kind of agreements with areas around us to help out as they are with us. It's been mentioned.
Yes.
In your opinion, how much longer, have you flown over Central Heights lately?
Flown, no, sir.
How much longer can Central Heights go without becoming an incorporated city? They're heavily relying on us for all the fire protection and everything. I mean,
I will say this, it's a little outside of my expertise, but Applebee's Central Heights arguably has the strongest volunteer department in the county. They are an ESD. They have a tax base and a funding mechanism there.
ESD meaning?
Emergency Services District, like a taxing entity.
Okay.
That funds their operations there. So they have for a rural volunteer-based department, they have a very robust system.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad I asked. I didn't realize that, I just thought they were totally dependent on your
No, sir.
department.
No, sir. We respond, of course, we respond rescue all throughout the county automatically, but we respond basically upon request, unless it's within our ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is 2 miles outside the city limits, going towards their jurisdiction. We'll automatically send a small response. They're not our normal response. And if they ask for help, then we assist.
Thank you.
I did want to make one more point about the option 3. What has been discussed in addition to option 3 is hiring additional firemen anywhere from 6 to 9. So if Station 2 were to respond to Nottingham, Robin Hood area, it would be fully staffed, whether it's coming from Station 2 or the combo station, because we're talking about adding additional firemen in addition to renovating. That's always been what's been discussed.
You have to be careful in this weather. Honestly, love it. Send more firemen. Send them all. I love it. But we do have to be careful with that because that's a different.
It's a budget item.
That's a recurring cost that unfortunately does only go up over time. And again, kind of circling back to our day one big list, part of the crafting there was so that we did not greatly increase manpower costs. Increase the efficacy of our manpower, but not drive the cost up. So I love the idea, but that's not something that we're building this around.
Yeah.
John?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Am I correct in thinking that the ladder truck with its remote nozzle is the most effective and safest way to deal with the older multi-story buildings, downtown in other words?
It can be an extraordinarily important piece, given the height, given the construction type, where you have party walls, you have construction types that aren't allowed basically in modern construction. It is critical. It does not negate the requirements of interior firefighting, but it is an absolute necessity downtown. Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Well, I was at the 1984 fire, and I remember that there was so much water being poured in through the windows that it was coming out of the windows. It was like a lake. And so I don't think it's accurate to say that nothing was happening until other fire trucks arrived. They were getting water on the fire ASAP through the windows.
Chief, do you remember where was the ladder at one in '84? I don't know.
I was a sophomore in high school.
We won't talk about that being there.
I know in the late 70s, early 80s, the ladder was at Central. When my brother worked there, but I don't know when they moved it. Any other questions? If you got a itch, let's get it scratched. Ron?
I'm just gonna give my observation. I know there's other people who have comments in regard to this, but, you know, we've listened, we've heard all kinds of various opinions of what's the best solution, you know, to this. And this certainly is the most significant, issue that we've faced in this whole thing. You know, sewers, streets, drainage, parks, you know, whatever the case, all those have been pretty easy decisions. This one is a little bit tougher, but I think really, I mean, if you look at it from me, as I've kind of listened to, I think all the information studied, we've heard from 2 consultants at least that have done studies on this. We've heard from our city engineer, and now we've heard from our fire department, the fire chief, interim chief, all the group there, and all of that recommendation says option 1, to steal your comment, Mike, achieves all priorities. All priorities. So for me, I mean, I just am very comfortable with moving forward with that particular part of our overall bond proposal, if that's where we need to head.
Ron, may I comment on your comment?
Yes, sir.
I couldn't agree with you more. but you've not commented on the political concerns of combining the two. And we've got to get these propositions passed. They're gonna be on the ballot one by one by one by one.
Exactly.
And, you know, we could have the best intentions in the world with the best research that we could find, the best recommendations from the fire department, the fire chiefs. But if we can't sell this to the voters, it's not gonna work.
I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, please do.
I'd like to make a comment too, and this is coming from the expert's report that you mentioned. It was his recommendation number 4, erect a 5th fire station, parentheses, assuming fire station number 2 and fire station number 5 are consolidated, close parentheses, in the vicinity of Gasway and the loop over there. So it wasn't that he was recommending just combine the 2 stations. That was hooked in together with the new station on the west side, because the west side's going to be cut off.
I'm not sure that he was anticipating moving Station 3 though.
Ma'am,
Yes, it's right here. Station 3 was in his recommendation.
I'm
Did you read
ignorant
this?
of I'm ignorant of some of that, but let Mike answer.
if I may, we have addressed this over and over.
Yeah.
Mr. Peach does indicate that, and his verbiage was poor. He says near future, I believe, somewhere in that report.
Yes.
I don't know what his definition of near future is. It's not my definition of near future. To put it crassly, if I'm still on this earth, I'll be very surprised. And that's assuming I have a long life, that I will have died peacefully of old age, hopefully. It is predicated on growth. If the growth and the development and the infill in that area happens quickly and provides a reason and a tax base to support that station, then we would look at that. There are no plans anytime remotely in the near future.
Well, admittedly, this was to attain an ISO 1.
Agreed.
But it begs the question, what's going to happen to our ISO rating if we combine those 2 stations and our entire west side of town is outside the 1.5 mile buffer?
Mr. Peach's report, if we're going to use that,
I thought we weren't.
says that we will hopefully maintain the 2 without the station, is new Station 5. Maintaining the 2 is not predicated on the construction of a new Station 5 at all. And then our goal, and we've repeated this ad nauseum, is to maintain 2. It is not to shoot for a 1. The cost benefit analysis for our community is not there. Doesn't make sense.
Pete's report, just looking at that on that particular discussion, talks about land for a 5th fire station would be much less expensive today than when the highway construction is complete and development soon follows. So we're anticipating the future in regard to that. I don't know how long it's gonna take for that highway to be there, but for me at least, to think about that, Philip, I mean, I would just say, hey, hooray, we've got enough development over there that we need another fire station. We got the tax base.
That's not what I'm
that
looking
comes with
at.
that.
What I'm
So
looking
that would be
at,
great.
what I'm looking at is our ISO report card that we have right now. And it's a mid-80, it's like an 84.
Yeah.
If we lose coverage on the west side, lose coverage on the east side, and drop down to 4 fire stations, we're gonna get hit for that. And
Well,
how badly so?
So,
May I interrupt you?
It depends on where
The
Station
plan
1 goes.
addresses that. It addresses going to 4 stations. It has never been predicated on that new 5th station. The plan to maintain the 2.
Then we would like to have this plan looked at by ISO. That is something that you can do.
You can't call ISO. We would love to have it. No harm, no foul, review of ISO.
I've got their number right in here.
You can't. They come in, they'll be happy to review us, and then we deal with the consequences of that. It's not a no harm, no foul. It is in my words, it's a fire marshal's inspection at your overcrowded club, and I'm gonna hold you to task. So we don't wanna pull that trigger
Philip?
without foresight.
Philip, I'm insured by Liberty Mutual, and they look at zip codes.
Right.
I don't-
USAA looks at zip codes.
So they're gonna be
State
looking at their
Farm
zip
looks
codes
at
over on the
zip
west side
codes.
of town. Their insurance rate's liable to go up.
And you know, right now, Philip, Oak Hill Plaza isn't covered by either currently. So it sucks to live in Oak Hill Plaza to begin with, and it sucks if your house catches on fire there. But that's a risk as a community that we take, and we've discussed other measures that could be implemented with the response time. And the other thing that for everybody to keep in mind with all this 1.5 mile, that's only good at that magical hour when all the firemen happen to be in the fire station.
Well, that
The firemen eat at Kinfolk, the firemen eat at Cotton Patch, the firemen eat at Cnac Burger. And all the response times change based on where the firemen are having lunch or at dinner. So I think we're, perfect is the enemy of good enough. Unfortunately, a lot of this is, as we've liked to quote Milt Moore a lot in this committee, this is all about risk, an assumption of risk. And the fire department, our fire protection services, and our police department, it's an insurance policy. And we've got to try to get the best thing that we can and something that's going to last into the future. And at some point, the city's going to have to do something. You're concerned about the 5th fire station. The only way a 5th fire station gets built is if our city council members decide to build a 5th fire station, committee or not. And right now, we're not recommending one, and I don't think they're planning on building
Well,
one.
I mean, the 5th one is only an issue if you combine the two. That's the only time it's an issue.
But it's only an issue if the city council decides to build one.
It does not necessitate the construction of a 5th station.
It's not gonna magically show up.
Okay.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have-
Look,
yes,
Miss-
one
Mr.
quick-
Peach doesn't work for the city.
Right.
He's a
what I
consultant.
would
He gets
add-
paid
And
to
I
do
thought we walked
consulting.
away from that. Didn't we not say that we are not looking
Well,
at the
that's
station
what we're
one
looking at,
anymore?
this part of the Peach report.
Yes.
What I would say is it gets back to the political thing you're saying. Because I'm hearing from people on the west side of town, that they are against the combining of those two stations.
So now you're
And
shifting to the west?
The
the west side is gonna be more affected than the east or the downtown.
Phil, first we
because they're
had
moving
the
station.
downtown merchants, and all the downtown merchants were against this. A guy that owns 19 buildings downtown showed up yesterday,
I
and
think
he
he owns
said,
7, but he doesn't own the most.
no, he owns 19, and he said he was fine with what the committee
There's
and the
others
fire
that aren't.
department said. Do
So
what?
it's not a blanket, everyone's fine, not everyone's
It's not
fine.
everyone's fine, but he's the only one that decided to show up.
That
And
was
if
a-
you're concerned, you show up. That's when they have their downtown meetings. That's why it was set at 8:30. I believe you helped coordinate the meeting.
The thing about that
And then-
meeting was
then
it
we
was never
shifted-
intended to be a community-wide meeting. What my inception of that meeting was that we were going to invite the people who had problems, who were opposed to the combo stations. That was the people, and I even tracked down some of the people that had spoken at some of the city council meetings.
Yep.
So I was targeting, if you have an issue
You were targeting
where
people
where
that
people that
were
don't want
against-
something and people do want it, you need to get the parties together to talk it out.
Right, so you were
So
looking for people who
we
were
against
opposed
it,
to
talk
any
the
fire station
When they saw
development.
that everyone from the community was coming, they said, to hell with it. That was just gonna be another August 24th meeting.
No, I don't think that's.
I talked to
And-
some
Not
people
the
that
people-
said that.
And then you shifted
It
to the
doesn't
people,
matter how many, I talked to people that said that's the reason.
and then
why
you
we did it.
shifted to people on the east side
I
of
didn't
town.
shift it to the east or the west. I originally talked about the west side of town at the Tiger Team. Did I talk about the west side of town at the Tiger Team meetings? Yes. That is a group that I don't know people on the west side of town. And that was another thing about the meeting. We only had like a week to prepare that meeting. It was impossible to get in touch with all the interested parties. So I'm saying if you're using that meeting as some kind of leverage to say, oh, people who are caring about this should have showed up, that's a bad
Well, what we're
conclusion
talking
from that
about,
meeting.
Philip, was downtown, because as you and I were going to just have downtown, that's why it was done at 8:30 in the morning, and you
We
coordinated.
started with
Wait,
that
wait,
because
wait,
they have a
wait.
way of getting
Let
in
me
touch
finish.
with you.
Let me finish. When we started it, and we wanted to address the downtown people, because you had talked about major concerns for downtown.
Yes.
So you contacted Main Street, and the lady set it up at 8:30 Monday morning. Because, actually, Main Street usually meets at 8:45, but we asked for 8:30, so we'd have a good amount of time for everybody who's come, and that's a regular time that they meet, so Mondays at 8:30, 8:45. So, and we were going to do it downtown and just do that, and then you surprised all of us at the last meeting saying, no, you wanted to include the other two, and that they were being invited, but very few of those people showed up, and
Yes.
only the ones who did were in favor of it, and the only people from downtown who came were, had no problem with
Well,
turning it over.
I'll give
So
you an update.
okay, but what I'm saying is, we have listened to some of the people. We've been at this since the first week of January. We have talked and we have looked at everything that we possibly could. We have researched, we have heard all sorts of breaking up and doing our own researches in small groups. And we have come to the conclusion that today, I want to see us come up with some kind of suggestion. The political part of it is not my concern. I want to pass it. But my problem is, we need to present to council our recommendation of what needs to be done. It is their responsibility to do two things. One, to call the bond if they agree with us or not. They can change whatever we say. I mean, we can make a recommendation for option one and they come back and say, no, we're gonna do option three. That's their decision. But the other part of that is the political consequences, the political fallout will have to be decided by those 5 people. And our charge from the day one was to come up with a need assessment, not what can get passed. So let's look at that. What do we think is absolutely the best thing for the community? What do we think that at the end of the day, our firemen will be safe, our city will be safe, and our taxpayers will be well served? Cities are not in the business to save money, they're in the business to provide the services that the people are willing to pay for. And that's what we've got to come up with. It's our best suggestion as to the needs. And I think that we have done an excellent job of looking at stuff. Y'all have worked your tails off. And now we need to come to some kind of consensus. It may not be unanimous.
That's right.
But we're gonna make a report on July 11th. And what we need you all to do today is to tell us as a majority, we may say, we may not get unanimous, but we need a majority opinion to work on some kind of consensus that we can present on July 11th. That was our charge, not anything any different.
When you
You're
go,
looking for a motion?
well, I think maybe we ought to do a straw vote.
Okay,
When you go,
Well, with the motion.
let's wait. John has some, let's let John do a little more and then we will. Yes.
I'm here, I will be here all weekend if you need me. I'm gonna step in the back of the room, it seems like it's time for you guys to talk.
You're gonna get out of the target?
I'm standing in the crossfire.
Can I go with you?
That being said, once again, certainly there are discussions to take place. However, I am extraordinarily excited. We are extraordinarily excited with the positive things that are coming out of this in one way, shape, form, or fashion. We're moving forward. We greatly appreciate that. And I've expressed that enough to each and every one of you, the amount of time, dedication, study that you put into this. So I will close with thank you. And again, I'll be right back there if something comes up and you'd like to pick my brain, what's left of it, I'll be.
Thank you for doing that. And as we tell you how, council has asked for it.
Has city council seen all 3?
No, Rhonda.
Unless they're here. Chad's the
Why don't
one,
they just do it with the fire?
Thank you, that was great.
It's not like it, why don't they just do it with the fire?
Maggie.
Say that that's what they're
Maggie.
and when I say lots of
I heard you had a question.
no, not really.
You sure?
No, I can't improve
Okay, Phil.
on what Judy
If
said.
they move one
We should end
west,
with that.
Right.
But I
would
did
that
want to ask
accomplish what you're
you,
talking about?
No, the response time.
Okay.
And when you look at the,
If they move
All right,
it,
let me get everyone's attention. I'm gonna try to tie a bow on this, okay? So, we've got to develop a recommendation to the city council. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Proposed rental obligation bond proposition categories, the things that we have been looking at. We've looked at airport, we've looked at fire stations, we've looked at downtown Nacogdoches, storm drainage, facilities, such as the city hall offices, Sunset Cemetery, the library, the rec center, our parks, and our streets and our sidewalks. We talked about this a few minutes ago. What's the most pressing need for the community? And are the dollar values that we've looked at fixed? So just think about that for a second. So this should say my recommendation, but I'm calling it ours because I'm a consensus builder. I'm recommending that we have 7 propositions to start with. We can slice and dice those in a minute. 7 propositions for the citizens in Nacogdoches to vote for on the bond. Our city council, our city staff, and the bond attorneys are the ones that determine the exact verbiage. We're not elected officials. We were asked or we volunteered to serve on the committee. At some point, we need to present something to Brad, and Chad, Kathleen, and Randy, and Roy and say, here's our best shot. What do y'all want to do? And then they have to discuss it. I don't think very many people in here are subject matter experts on most of the things that we've talked about. I mean, Maggie's got some good water, environmental sewage chops. There's some folks that have some skill sets here, but we have city staff, and they get paid money to do stuff for the city. So the ultimate verbiage of the bond proposition needs to rest with them. I think we have general agreement on almost everything that we've talked about. We just need to nail down the dollar values and then talk about a few extra things that have come up in conversation or in presentations, but we need to see if we want to recommend that either as something to go onto the bond or something that we strongly feel that the city should consider. So remember, we divided into teams. We had group 1, we had group 2, we had group 3, and we had group 4. John Anderson, I love you, but group 4 was more philosophical recommendations than dollar values, so I excluded y'all from the list. But based on these functional areas, there's where the groups laid out. Group 1 came in at around, say, 37 million. Group 2, 46 million. Group 3, 40 million-ish. The averages are over here on the right.
Hey, John.
Yes,
can I
ma'am.
ask a real quick question? Where up here is water? I mean, what is that? What is water a part of?
Water is part of a utility rate bond.
Oh, so we're not even talking about
No,
that?
ma'am. That's one of the,
Okay, I got you. Yeah,
that's one of the
right.
recommendations.
Okay.
You're not gonna see sewer on here either,
Okay.
or landfill. So, what about fire stations? We just had a great presentation from Chief Brown. Consensus is that something needs to be done. The fire department and the city manager have provided some realistic and detailed options. During this entire committee, I went to college with a gentleman named Kenton Heinze. Kenton is the president of Brown and Butler Construction Company. They're based out of Leander, Texas. They're one of the largest builders of municipal facilities in Central Texas. Construction costs in Central Texas are different than they are in Nacogdoches, but he's built a lot of fire stations. I called him, said, hey, what do you think? I have another really good friend named Brian Sabile. Brian is a programming architect for a company called Facilities Programming and Consulting. They've done the programming for the last 10 buildings built at Stephen F. Austin, and they're working on another one. A programming architect looks at your requirement and figures out how many square feet you need. Both of those guys are very much in tune with construction costs, A&E fees, and remodel versus rebuild. When I talked to both of them, Steve Bartlett don't get upset, but they laughed at the $300 square foot remodel number that we have on here. Because what they both told me, you don't know what you're gonna get into until you get into it. And at the end of the day, you've still got something old. Now, I have a 1975 Ford Bronco truck. It's the last classic year they made a Ford Bronco. I bought it for, I think, $5,000 a long time ago. And I've been dragging it all over the country while I was on active duty in the Army. And I finally had time to start. I dream of being James Stanley with the Porsches. And you can attest to this. It costs more money to completely renovate and restore, make like new an old vehicle. I'd be better off to go to Tipton Ford and buy a brand new Ford Bronco. But I don't want a brand new Ford Bronco, I want my 1975 Ford Bronco. If we want to keep our 1909 fire station downtown, but make it modern, it's gonna cost a lot of money. And that's why there's a lot of money figure on there, and that's still probably low. You get into asbestos abatement, oh my God, we didn't know we had to replace all the plumbing because there's lead pipes, who knows what all's in there. The difference between new construction and the fire station remodel, if you look at your number, it's $120,000. Now, I'm not willing to just toss $120,000 out of my wallet, but when we're talking in the millions of dollars, that's a fairly insignificant amount of money in the grand scheme of dollars. Structural assessment. I know there's a lot of people on the committee. We need to hire a structural architect, structural engineer to go look at the structure. The only way you could really look at the structure of an old building is to tear off the sheetrock and tear off the facade to see what's inside the walls. Or bring some kind of a fancy x-ray machine. It may or may not work. The Station 5 was built a long time ago. Y'all heard, if you were here yesterday, Rusty Sanders was talking about City Hall, built a long time ago. To do a really good structural assessment, you've got to start cutting holes in things to look and see how it was made. And then you gotta fix the hole. And all that costs money and scaffolding. And then while that's going, where did the firemen go when the structural assessment's being done? So it's probably gonna meet or exceed the $120,000 difference. We can agree to disagree on this, but the downtown merchants don't seem to be opposed to consolidating number 2 and 5. If you were at the certificate of obligation meeting, Linda Greer stood up and talked for a long time about the bond and how she was opposed to the certificates of obligation. I asked her, are you gonna come to the meeting? And she said, no, I trust the fire department and the committee that you're on. So she's not opposed, one way or the other. She doesn't care. That's why she didn't come to the meeting yesterday. So what we need to think about as a group, do we, one, recommend do nothing? Just tell the city council we can't figure it out, we're not gonna recommend anything for the fire stations. That's an option. Stick with the $15 million and cut something out of the plan. That's an option. Endorse the 16-point-X, because there's the 3 different options on here, and cut funds from another item if we think that the bond's gonna be too high. Or endorse the $16 million and go with whatever that total bond amount is. We can pick one of the 3. We can tell the city we recommend option 1, or we can say, here's 3 potential options. City council, y'all figure out what's best that you think will pass. We all are from the wards. I think I know what my neighbors would want, and some want one thing, some want another thing. I know all of our council members have ward meetings. So there's lots of ways to find out. So we don't have to give them, you need to do option 2.5. We could just say, here's the 3 options, y'all pick the one that's best for you. The sale of land or reuse of land could offset the project cost and repurpose. We've talked about that. You know, we talked about eventually, one day, Over the Rainbow and Skies Are Blue and Interstate 69 is finished. Our animal control facility is going to have to relocate. Well, maybe it relocates to station number 3. The city owns the property. It's a fairly convenient location. The dogs and cats won't mind the interstate. Could be a good deal. Just something to think about. So, a proposed recommendation. And I want to talk about the airport real quick. We all said, yay, the airport, got to have the airport. If we get the airport fixed, industry will flock to Nacogdoches. I'm not buying it, and she's in the aviation industry. So, but it would be a good thing. But that $7 million-ish ask that we all talked about in our presentations was contingent upon getting a match. We don't have a match. We don't even have a match book. No one's offered to match anything. So do we really want to ask the voters for $7 million if there's nothing to match against it? Because we're not going to be able to do what the phase 1 of the airport plan was designed to do.
that could be done at a later date with many different funding mechanisms. Yes, ma'am.
Question, because there was discussion that what do we need to be, what needs to be true? Because that was discussed at the airport, that there was a private match, which is why I know our group, that was the only reason we put the airport money on there, was because that was presented when we visited the airport. So what needs to be true in order for what you just said to become valid?
Somebody on the city staff needs to say to us, we have a match. And as of yesterday, we did not have a match. Do we have a match?
No,
No match.
So then, so you guys manage the relationship or the conversations with what, the airport?
Yes.
Okay.
With the matchers.
Yeah, I mean, that was our whole point, correct me if I'm wrong, the four of us,
No,
we all
yeah, we
said,
said no if there's
No,
no
if
match,
there's no
yes
match.
if there is a match.
If
Okay,
there
and
is, there
as
is.
of right now, there's no match that the city staff is aware of.
So then, did somebody circle back around with the airport to say, hey, that in order for this to be considered, based on what you said at that meeting, this is what this is what we need to see?
Sure, and Eric was always that we were in conversations about a match. There was a foundation that had approached us about the possibilities of it, and we still today feel as confident as we did when we were at the airport.
Yeah.
That could come together, but this has gotta get posted in election language in August.
Before
So-
they will match it, so it's
No,
like, oh,
No, I'm just saying, before we go to the voters, we've got to know, is it a real project or not? And
correct, okay.
What John's telling you is that we think this may all gel together. In fact, I'm very confident that there's things there
Yeah.
between the feds and between private money. But today, I do not have that paper to assure you that I have $7 million.
Gotcha, okay.
I'm gonna skip to downtown. There was near virtual consensus that up $435,000 needed to be spent downtown, fixing some sidewalks, fixing some ramps, getting the electrical taken care of, getting the electrical hookups at Festival Park, and consolidated trash points. Storm drainage, the numbers varied, but $5,900,000 would get our critical storm drainage to tier 1 plus a little bit more. It wasn't the full amount, but it's tier 1 plus a little bit more. Facilities, there seemed to be consensus amongst all the groups that Sunset Cemetery office and equipment storage should be fixed. And that's $425,000. Parks, general upgrades to playgrounds, restrooms, fitness stations, $2.2 million. And then streets and sidewalks, a citywide street rebuild to tier 1 plus for the streets. So that's almost all, that's all the tier 1 plus some of the tier 2. And then $1 million for sidewalks, and that's that 11 million. So counting the airport, that's 43,990,000 if we take the airport off, in the 36 million range for a bond. But just go with that 43 million number because I didn't change all my slides. So that will be $176 per $100,000 tax valuation on a house after exemptions. The median home value in Nacogdoches is up there on the slide, and that would be for somebody that had a $151,000 house, they would pay $267 additional dollars in taxes. Do we have valuations from Central Appraisal District yet? No, and that's another fun thing. So we don't, the Central Appraisal District, their computer broke, and they got infested with fleas, so they're having problems, and they don't know how much our property is worth right now. Other items, two things that we have talked about. First one, do we want to have a separate proposition for an emergency vehicle preemption system? Tyler, Texas just did one for $1.2 million. What is that? If you don't know, there's a little doofer on top of the traffic light. I guess it will sit next to that little camera that controls the lights. The fire trucks have a really cool radar laser beam fire truck gonoculator thing. And when the fire truck is going down the road, or the police car is going down the road, or the ambulance is going down the road, it turns this light green and it turns these lights red, so the traffic gets out of the way and it allows the emergency vehicle to get where it needs to go faster
and doesn't have to juke around the intersection and do fun things like that. There are a couple of different ways that the city could go about purchasing these. We haven't talked about it in depth. You can buy it outright, it's yours, have a nice day. You can lease it in perpetuity, it's yours. Or I should say you can rent it in perpetuity. You just keep paying them and they come maintain it, they fix it, they do whatever. Or you can lease it, you know, lease to own, rent to own. But Tyler just got one for 1.2. Tyler's a lot bigger than us, so I would think that ours would be a little bit cheaper than Tyler. There was discussion of skate park. Some of the committees liked the skate park. Some of the committees said no skate park. We could put that in with the parks project, or we could have that as a separate item, as a separate proposal on the bond, a single bond item for a skate park. Additional recommendations that we have talked about as a committee, going through my notes. We've talked about increasing street maintenance fees on the water bill. The last time these were set was around 2017, is that right? Yep. So recommendation of bumping up residential from $5 a month to $7.50 a month. Multifamily and duplex properties. Right now, if you live in an apartment, you only pay $2.50. You still have 2.5 cars and drive on the same street, but you only pay $2.50 a month because you live in an apartment and not in a house. So I would recommend that we bump the multifamily and duplex properties up to $7.50, just like everybody else that has a residence. Commercial is currently at $7.50, bump that to $11.25, and industrial is currently $15, bump that to $22.5. That should ensure that the city has enough money to take care of our streets proactively instead of letting them deteriorate and then having to go ask for a bond and get money. So with the bond plus that, we ought to have pretty darn good streets in Nacogdoches. People won't laugh and think that they're going into Louisiana when they come to parts of Nacogdoches. Implement a drainage fee based on a topographic study. These are just recommendations to the city. These aren't bond items. But we had discussed, you know, for the stormwater drain maintenance, some places have a lot more stormwater than other places. And so that's something that the city could look at implementing, is a stormwater drainage fee. I know we've spent several $1 million, I think, Steve, is that right, on the stormwater emergency repairs recently?
We're underway with it.
Underway with it. And then the third thing, which we discussed several weeks ago, this committee, in some form or another, needs to reconvene in the fall to work on water, sewage, and solid waste as part of a utility revenue bond of some sort, around $30 million or more dollars. So to review, here's where the groups landed. Group 1 landed at 36. Group 2, 46, Group 3, 40, the average was 41. If we get rid of the airports with all those values, we're at 36, which is gonna be less than the tax number that I showed you a few minutes ago.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How many separate bond issues do you think these projects will sort themselves out into?
I think these will sort themselves into 7.
You think there'll be 7 separate
Propositions.
propositions to
Yes,
vote on?
ma'am.
One
I do.
for each of these?
I do,
Okay.
but I'm not a bond attorney.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, that's really important to know that.
But if we start lumping these together, then some of these are definitely gonna fail, or a whole
Okay,
bunch of
gotcha,
them are gonna
gotcha,
fail.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I think it's probably gonna be, and maybe, you know, maybe downtown and facilities gets combined, I don't know. And again, that's not my expertise, but I think these are things that we need to consider recommending to the city council, that these are things that you ought to figure out how to do a bond for.
Okay.
So that's me trying to tie a bow on this thing, so, Ronnie.
I'm just curious, your fees that you,
Yes, sir.
you talked about there, that's gonna generate sufficient, and I think I saw Steve nod his head, yes, that will generate sufficient income each year to maintain our streets at a reasonable rate, right?
Yes, sir.
Over time, I mean, that keeps up with our maintenance requirements.
correct, Steve?
And let me clarify that, that's assuming that we have a big push of money that gets us to a maintenance level.
Yes.
And then that will let us coast, and it's nothing's forever running, but for a long time, that will help us maintain all of
Did
it.
we play with a number as far as how much did that generate, what we talked about up here? What we saw on this board here, do we know?
No, I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna assume that it will, because that was one of my real, desires, was to generate enough fee income to be able to keep up with some of the maintenance that we need to on our streets. Because before, it's not gonna do us any good if we spend this money and we don't kick up, you know, the maintenance, allowance. We don't kick that up, we're gonna be right back in the same spot again. I don't wanna do that, you know?
John, go back a slide with your, do that, to the fee. So you're looking at 150% on residential and double on multifamily. So just throwing out numbers, guys, I mean, it'd be easy to get, you're gonna be well north of $1 million in revenue.
Additional, right?
Well, I don't think it's gonna be an addition. Right now, the total package is 750. So,
I'm sorry.
and a big part of that's residential.
Well, I know we're giving a certain amount already in our budget for maintenance. And I think that's
So we have,
750.
so no, we have 750,000 that comes in from the fee, this
Right,
fee.
okay,
And then we have 250,000 that's in the normal operations budget,
okay.
and 250,000 that's in our CIP.
All right, so we got $1,250,000.
1,250,000.
And this increase adds what to it?
Well, this is increasing the 750,000 mark.
To,
I mean, you may get another 500 or so.
okay, so we would get pretty close to $2 million a year worth of,
I think that's safe to say.
and you think that's adequate to maintain things in a reasonable way?
I think right now we calculate, and it changes every day for case scenarios, asphalt changes, but I think right now we would like, in today's conditions, about $2.5 million a year to maintain level. So if we can get everything up to snuff and we can have either under 2 million, I think we can do a whole lot of maintenance on the street. Because maintenance is a lot cheaper than a full rebuild.
And council should be increasing that maintenance as.
Over time,
as
yeah, exactly.
things go up.
Fair enough.
Question?
Maggie has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if today is decision day, which I hope it is, I would like, as James pointed out, a straw poll, but I feel like we've put so much energy into the fire station thing. I'm gonna be very disappointed if we don't have a straw poll about that will address the three options that were presented very excellently today and very, very concisely. So,
Well, can you go back to that
and
slide?
then maybe go back to the whole thing, because right now my brain is like bouncing back and forth between the firefighter presentation and the big picture, so that's my.
Oh, no, the recommendation, the three, because originally, so there's been discussion, and I saw up here that,
I don't have their thing on the slide.
no, I'm talking about the recommendations that you'd said
That's
about,
the-
hey, these are potentially, maybe we could go
Yeah.
with,
Well,
recommend this.
yeah,
Right?
and also a follow-up
That's-
question. What about
Tell me to stop.
what about our missing members? Because they've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I hope that we're not gonna leave them out of this important vote without, I mean, are they calling in, or?
No, they are incommunicado. We had one quit the first day, another one
Well, yeah, I
resigned.
know, but I'm talking about like
Matt-
Lily
Matt
and,
was-
and,
I don't know, I tried to contact Lily last night and I haven't gotten a response, so I'm not sure what's going on with Lily.
She's on
and,
travel status.
oh, what's her name? Can't
And I know
remember.
she does something really remote, because the last time she traveled status, she didn't get any text messages, which is smart, leave your phone at
Yeah,
home.
because if we're gonna have another meeting, I'm going out of town, and I've got so much invested in this, I don't wanna miss the opportunity to vote.
Well, we're
You
gonna
know.
vote today.
I think we
Okay.
voted today.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but then you were talking about thinking about another meeting, and I
Yeah,
don't
if the
wanna-
vote goes really bad, like if it's 50-50 or something,
Okay.
then
Okay,
I'm
thank
gonna
you.
try to make y'all come back.
Thank you.
So can I make a?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
whatever you need to do.
So, because when I came in here, the first question was, hey, looking at the three options, speaking specifically to fire stations, that we were supposed to, the ask was to make one recommendation to city council. I'm going with up here, all three of these, and it goes back to really our original group, at the end of our group, our recommendation was 15 million-ish, right? That was actually our
That
That
was
was the
it.
Tiger team.
Okay, and
15
that,
million.
no, I'm talking about before the Tiger team, our
The
group of
separate
four,
groups.
Yeah, our group
where we
of four.
spent 4 hours and 45 minutes at my kitchen table,
It
which
was a
was
good
great.
meal, too.
Y'all come back.
It was a good
Listen,
meal.
Maggie, make the salad again. But I think the recommendation is we present this to city council, all three options, like, to me, this is the product of,
I would like to present one if we can.
Yeah,
I
I would
agree,
too.
and I think
I would
that's what
too.
council
I don't
wants
think
to-
we're ready to say we're gonna do
Right.
three.
I think
And if
one.
we don't vote on this, I'm with Maggie, I'm gonna
okay,
have to
so
go
I'm
into.
I'm saying what
I'm
my, I'm
agree
starting
therapy.
the conversation, I'm starting the conversation that, and look, I'm not, my recommendation is the work and effort that has been gone in to get to these three here, and all the work that we've done, I say we start here and work our way back. So, or maybe we start at one and this becomes if we can't get to one, we allow city count, we make this the recommendation.
However the vote goes, it goes, but if we don't vote on this, I'm gonna have to go into grief counseling.
Me too.
This is,
Ron,
I'm gonna make a motion that we go with option one on this fire department, report. It checks all the boxes, it's been looked at significantly amount of time. I think it's the right decision. Personally, I think there should be fairly good consensus, but I think that's where we need to be. I think we need to just get settled on that and move on.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a
Second.
second, John Anderson, second.
okay, all in favor of going with
Do
option
we,
one, raise your hand.
before this goes any further, Rhonda, you're getting this down?
Yes.
Who made the motion and who
If
made
you're
the
in
second?
favor, raise your hand.
Okay.
1, 2,
Of option
3,
one?
4, 5,
Mhm.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If you're opposed,
Can I say why I'm
Two.
opposed?
sure.
Of course.
I'm really uncomfortable with, they have not taken any of the recommendations from our Tiger team. One was to lead them downtown, and then to cut down on the cost. I just think we're asking a lot from our community to do this, and this doesn't include furniture.
It does. Yes, ma'am,
It
it does.
does?
Yeah, if you look at that sheet, everything's on there. It is soup to nuts.
I am totally for the fire stations, but I think we're asking our community for too much.
now,
I
too much,
disagree.
too much movement of
Too much
stations.
money. I think that we haven't tried, I don't think, we've tried to do, we can't, at our meeting, when we finished, at our last meeting, we all came to, we were all in agreement. Okay, we said it's so much to consolidate these two fire stations. So we decided, okay, what we're gonna do is we'll consolidate the two fire stations, but we're gonna leave our fire
Administration.
chief and those people downtown. But you look at how many offices they have, I mean, it's extravagant. So I'm not for it for that reason.
Okay,
Terry,
that's okay.
Terry's finally gonna speak.
Write this down in the
Yes,
notes.
everybody,
Terry is
please.
speaking.
First of
Okay.
all, I want to remind everybody that I live in the Arbor Oak subdivision. And y'all have a lot of talk about, how far everything's gonna be. They can't get to us right now. They haven't been able to get to us for years, not even months, right? In a way, because, that street has been closed a long, long time. I'm, the block captain for our neighborhood watch, and I don't have anybody at all, ever, in all these years, worried that it's gonna take the fire department 5 more seconds to get to our house than it did before when they were right across the loop. I mean, and that was that fast, you know what I mean? And they don't, I just don't hear this kind of talk with our people. They're so excited to get the flyover and get back to our life where we can have a surface street to get anywhere. Because, y'all, sometimes I don't even leave my house because the traffic's so bad. I have to just depend on a semi to let me out if I'm gonna go anywhere. Because we're kind of locked in right over there, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So the argument about how much longer it's gonna take a fire truck to get somewhere that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's just not even in my mind. Because if it was, it would be in our neighborhood, big time right now. okay? So to me, that, we're talking about some of these other arguments that we're getting rid of, well, let's just get rid of that one. Because they're doing the very best they can. I've seen them go up and down North Street when their sirens are blazing and people are not even, they're oblivious to a fire truck coming. So, I mean, they've got other irons in the fire besides just getting to my house from where they are right now. There's a lot that people are not respectful of our fire department. So in my mind, we are not asking our community to do too much. We have not done enough for years and years and years. I don't even want to go back how many years. We have not done enough for our firemen, our fire people, our firefighters. I mean, I'm trying to encompass everybody. But anyway, but anyway, we have got to get past these nitpicking almost in a way, just like kids in school. Come on, let's find a way that we can meet up here and do something for these people that work very hard for us, put their life in danger for us, and we're asking them to almost do things that can't be done. I mean, I watch those renovation shows on TV, and it is bizarre some of the stuff they come in, all what you just talked about over here, the problems that they have renovating old. Well, I'm sick of having old. I don't want us to have old anymore. Let's do something and have some new for a change. You know what I mean? Let's do something and make them proud to live in Nacogdoches, Texas, the oldest city in Texas. We don't have to have our buildings look like that.
That's
okay? Right. So let's do something finally for all the community. We're really trying to just do everything that's better for the community. That's what all of this that we've done, all these hours and time and papers. Oh, you know, I mean, that we're just trying to do better for our community. Can we just come together somehow and make a change for our fire department that's going to make the best change for everybody here? Let's just try to do that. I'm sorry.
I think you're going to
No,
vote
you
for
did a
the
good
bond.
job.
I'm voting for the bond.
Okay, Terry.
Call the question.
Terry, where have you been all over?
Well,
the
I've been
last
listening.
month?
Don't think I haven't been listening
That's
and
right.
reading,
Making
because
up
I
for
have.
lost time.
Ron's calling.
Saving it up.
I would also make a formal motion that we pull the airport number out of the.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, right?
No,
Yeah,
we just voted
so,
on it.
and I just wanted,
Yeah, we voted on it.
What was the vote?
real quick, it was,
Okay,
12 to 2.
just wanted to clarify.
Barbara, I do have a question. So you were on group 2, right?
Huh?
You were on group 2. You were a member of group 2 when we did the groups.
1. She was group 1.
No, we were group 1.
And, oh, yeah, she was group 2.
You were group
Yeah.
2. Group 2 came in at 15 million for fire stations. We're talking about 16.7 right now, which is 1.7 million more than 15. That is a lot of money, but dispersed across the tax rate for property evaluation, it's infinitesimal.
Mm-hmm.
Your group had the highest bond recommendation of $46 million. We're talking about now 43 minus 7, we're in the 30s.
Well, nobody said -7 yet. We have to vote on that.
Well, we're getting ready to vote on that, but it'll pass.
Hey, we
So,
voted on the first one already?
we
Yeah.
voted on the first
So
one.
it's passed, right?
And it's been counted.
Okay.
But Barbara wanted to be heard.
Barbara
Do
wanted
you
to
wanna
speak,
go?
so I just wanted
And
to
then
speak to
Terry.
her.
I would just make
I
a
just want
comment.
to say that Barbara and Philip have made us do a much better and more thorough job
Exactly.
of analyzing this problem, and I thank both of them for that.
Due
And
diligence.
I think that disagreement is healthy, and we're gonna come up
You
with the
bet.
best solution by addressing your concerns and Philip's concerns.
And it
So
is,
I appreciate you.
it will allow us, as we go forward, trying to get this bond passed, to be able to answer questions as to why we came to the conclusions we did.
Yeah, I didn't vote against it because I don't want something for the fire department. I voted against it because I'm in favor of option 3. That's the only reason I voted against it.
Yeah, we know.
And you have a right for that, Phil.
Yeah,
You've
yeah,
done a
that's
lot
right.
of work.
Okay,
I would loop you in there too, Maggie.
there was a
though. We've
motion
done a lot
for the
of work, too.
airport. Can you re-motion your airport, please?
Well, I'll make a speech first. And we put that proposition in there for the airport based on betting on the com for matching money. That has not materialized and it's decision day. Therefore, I would make a motion that we remove $7.3 million from our overall recommendation for the airport because the reason for putting it in there is no longer valid.
Can I-
second it.
Okay, great, yes, and, let me say, could we possibly
Yes.
put that in our narrative that we took it out, but if between now and the time the bond is created, if that comes back, then we would go with the
Do
seven?
you want me to amend my motion, or you want to make a separate motion?
No, if you would, how do you feel about that? Before, since you were making the motion.
I think we've got to keep this below 40, we got to keep this below 40 million to get it passed. I would not do that. If you want to make a separate motion,
No, I just was bringing it up as a
Since
possible.
we're in discussion time, Erica.
Yeah, I
No,
actually,
and-
when
and-
we get a motion, do we move on the?
Well, there's a
wrong
motion on the
order?
table, it hasn't been seconded,
Okay.
you have a discussion.
I would make a separate motion to the very point of what Judy said, that
the
we
motion,
take
the motion has been seconded.
I
The
second
motion
it.
has been seconded?
Yes,
Okay.
I second
Okay,
it.
Should
great.
we vote on that right now, or can it?
No, you discuss it.
We can
now.
discuss.
Okay.
We discuss.
All right, so
And cuss.
my,
Cuss and discuss.
my recommendation would still be that if the match comes, that we keep it on the bill, or on the list here, if between now and July 11th,
Or whatever the council makes their decision.
yeah, whenever council makes their decision, it gets confirmed, because that's $7.5 million that we wouldn't have to come up with at a future time, that if we can get it subsidized, get the commitment, if that were something that, I think that's just a detail, I mean, I've already sent a message to a couple of people, and they said, give me a call, so I would say, to that point, I would like to keep it on there for the simple fact of missing out on matching dollars from private funds is a benefit to the future.
I am a certified parliamentarian. That is an amendment that you have to get a second for, and we vote on the amendment first
That's correct.
before you vote on the motion.
Okay.
So if you can get a
So
second
are you
for
making
that,
an amendment, or are you just discussing?
I'm discussing right
Hey,
now.
I might be a second on that, but let me ask a question. Can I ask
Okay.
a question of
Yep.
the engineer for a
Yes.
second?
Mhm.
Steve, what is the odds of us, let's just say that we approve $7.3 million for airport expansion or improvements, and we caveated it to where it said that it's subject to matching fund, receipt of matching funds dollar for dollar for the money that gets spent out of that pool. Is that allowable or not?
I don't believe it will be at election time, I think it will be for your council, but they're gonna have to adopt an ordinance on August 16th, no later than August 16th, that specifically outlines all the part issues with the bond. I think it's gonna have to say that.
That's what I'm saying, though, you could put that in there and say that any money spent for airport funds would need to be matched, correct?
Ronnie, I've never seen an election that had it.
I don't think that would be.
No, but we could say that prior to the city council meeting in August, 16th, you said? And then on August 16th, the decision is made at that point. No matching funds, we're done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Matching funds, we're going with it.
But what are the odds of us getting matching funds by then?
Well, it doesn't matter.
Well, okay, what is it?
You might get a commitment, you get a signed commitment, like we did for.
Yeah, I guess what's the requirement?
I think just council's comfort level that it's real.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Okay, so there's a motion to remove the airport from the bond, it's been seconded, all in favor, raise your
I
hand.
will make the motion to amend
Oh,
it.
you're now,
She's amending it.
now, you said you were discussing, but now you're.
Because we were discussing.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
so.
we had some stuff to say.
Oh, okay, say it.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, to his comment about making sure it's below 40 million, I mean, the average, for the average home is 151 million, or $151,000 home.
With a median, that's just the middle.
The middle, okay, $267. Like, is $3 million gonna make a huge difference to that? Like,
You mean 7 million?
yeah, or 7 million, like keeping it under.
I mean, not to the, it depends.
Yeah.
You know, some people look at the total amount, and they just take a shot, and they
It's
go,
about
okay,
15%.
50%.
You could take 15% of 200,
Yeah.
what did you say,
$267.
$267, so 15% of that would be about what that would be, so it'd be about $40.
$40 more. That becomes messaging.
Okay, did anyone second your amendment?
Anybody seconding my amendment? Oh,
Did John Anderson
Yeah.
second the?
Yeah, I'll second.
The amendment is that we provide the city council with constructive language, that we may get something in the future before they have to sign stuff on August the 11th, and if they do, then the airport will be bonded out.
So if we get a solid answer before we have to really make a decision, then we are putting that on there.
Right.
correct. You
Correct.
got it.
That's the amendment.
That's the amendment.
Okay, we have a motion.
Okay,
to
so
amend.
all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All opposed? 1, 2. Okay, so the amendment carries.
Now we vote on the
Now you vote on
original.
the motion,
And now we're gonna vote on the
the
motion.
amended
All
motion.
those in favor of, the amended motion to
No, the original motion.
the original motion,
As amended.
As
amended. It has been
which
amended.
doesn't make any sense.
That's what you're voting on.
Parliamentarian over here, we got it
You're a
right.
registered parliamentarian.
You
right?
need to defeat my motion.
Yeah,
And
but
we
you
just
gotta
did.
have the whole thing.
So all
I'm
those in
gonna
favor.
vote, I'm gonna vote against my motion.
All those in favor of the motion to remove the airport item from the bond proposal list, raise your hand. All those against it, raise your hand.
This is the original motion.
Yeah.
This is the original motion.
If you want,
Where
if
is
you,
the-
okay, put your
Oh,
hands
yeah.
down. We're gonna start
I'm
over.
confused, I'm sorry.
Your original motion,
Hers is better than mine.
I'm not questioning.
Oh,
your
okay,
vote,
okay.
I'm clarifying. I'm
Can you
seeking to
withdraw your
clarify.
motion?
If you want to withdraw your motion, and then we can withdraw our amendment.
And then we can make a new motion.
I can't withdraw my
No,
motion.
just vote on the original and then we can go
Yeah,
on
so
from here.
his original motion was to remove the airport item from the bond
Altogether.
altogether.
Today,
Wait, but
right
how
now.
does the
Today.
amendment apply to that motion if it gets?
It's a second, it's a second motion. And that one, the original would just go away and would just stay with the second one.
Yeah.
So we want to defeat his if we want to.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, I
Yes,
can withdraw my
exactly,
motion if
exactly.
I can get a second.
Second, and he will draw.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to withdraw the motion that's currently on the table?
That
That
was
defeats the
unanimous.
motion.
Okay,
That was
perfect.
Okay, no, what's your motion?
Oh.
I'm against it.
Oh, okay, we
I'm
can
not
make,
everything.
it's, yeah, it's,
Okay,
As
so.
predicated.
13 to 1.
Okay. All right. Any other things to vote on? What else we need to vote on?
One
Ron?
question in regard to the bond, I guess the amount that we are advocating here, is it 43,990,000 subject to the airport money having matching funds? Is that-
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So it is 43,990,000 as far as what we're going with?
Yes.
Unless they don't get any money.
Unless they, well,
Unless
unless,
there's no
yeah,
match.
it's
Unless,
subject to those
unless the
matching
airport
funds.
match
Right.
doesn't come through, then we pull
Hopefully
out.
it is. Now, the other thing is, that traffic light thing that we talked about, is that something that we need to
I
add to
think what we
this?
need to ask,
That's a
if
budget
that
item.
is included in, in the, option one,
It's not.
It's not.
that,
not.
that
It's not.
particular
It's
piece
a
of,
separate item.
equipment. Okay, then what we need to do is vote that in. If that is,
So that would be an additional, in addition to
What?
four.
Well, we don't know, it wouldn't be
Well,
1.2, that's what
wouldn't that be a
Tyler
budget
was.
item?
And that's a lot larger.
Yeah, a lot larger city, it's going to be
What
less.
convinces you that's a bond item rather than a?
oh,
Yeah.
I'm not,
Exactly.
I'm not.
I
I don't
agree.
mean that. I
Yeah.
just mean,
It shouldn't be a
maybe
bond
we
item.
put that into our recommendation along with what we're saying about the airport stuff. You know,
Well,
when
so-
we instruct
Maybe the
council.
question that's up for discussion is, does this committee want to put that in as a bond item or a recommendation for that to be added into the general, like the I don't know, Steve,
Can Steve talk to that?
Steve can always talk.
No, I think that's a great idea. We're looking at $750,000. That's a real rough count for us, y'all.
So, to that point, if we're considering not having something that's $1 million to $750,000 on a bond, because bonds are asked for whole lots of money,
Mm-hmm.
do we need to be putting $400,000 city could potentially cash flow those two items? Just a question to the committee.
Which was
That's a good question.
discussion that we
Yeah,
had in our,
that's
on
exactly
several
what we
things.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't.
City
borrow.
manager, has some input.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Yes.
Colonel Callahan,
Jones.
based on those smaller numbers, for the downtown improvements of the facilities, I think a recommendation from this committee, because you're not a bond committee, you're a capital needs advisory committee. And I think a recommendation on those smaller items for the city council to fund that out of excess reserves or some other fund, some other opportunity over the next couple of years would be a great opportunity to pull a little bit of that money out of the bond. Also, I think the Opticom, because we don't have hard numbers to give you tonight, I think that pulling those out, and if this committee wants to offer a recommendation that the city fund those things, that's pretty doable over the next couple of fiscal years out of excess reserves, so above our reserve requirements.
Okay, now we're lowering that number.
Is that
I'm liking the
Steve,
sound of
You
that.
know, I'm saying, and also, these are all long-term finance things, 25 or 30 years. Some of these smaller things, it makes sense to finance them for less, which was the purpose of tax anticipation notes or COs or whatever. So I'm saying those options still exist for city council to fund, especially smaller items like this one.
So that gets it to 35.53 million. If we
If-
take out the
if you take
airport
out the
and the
airport.
400.
We're not taking out the airport.
Right, no, she's just,
Well, but we probably
If it doesn't
will.
get a match.
I mean,
if it doesn't get a
If it
match.
Yes,
doesn't
I
get a match.
understand that, but,
We should assume. that
but
we're gonna
without,
do
without the airport, it would be 35,530. And without the downtown and the facilities.
And with
So-
the airport, you just subtract the, what is that,
800.
860?
Yeah.
So with,
860,000, so it drops it
If the
about
magic
42
airport-
million.
Right, if the magic airport ferry lands and brings some money.
Or 43 million.
it would be
drops to
42,830 with
Yeah.
the airport.
Yeah.
But without it, it's 35,530. So the 35, that's something
I
that
would-
Roy's probably more comfortable
So we're
with.
taking out 435 and 425?
Whoa, whoa,
Yes,
whoa,
they're
whoa,
gonna put
whoa,
that in the
whoa.
city
Yes.
budget.
Wait,
He's recommending that we do that. I make a
Wait.
motion that we do that.
Oh.
Can I do that? Did I beat you to
Wait,
it? I'm
let's
sorry.
let
I'm
him.
sorry.
Let me just
Yeah.
suggest this. When you take that out, it removes some of the imperative to get it done.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then a ditch collapses under the Methodist church, and then a ditch collapses, and here's $1 million here and $1 million there, and this can just gets kicked down the road and kicked down the road. If we leave those in there, there is no guarantee it will get done, but it's a strong suggestion to the council that they get that accomplished.
And like you say, where facilities are at, but we are also capital needs and not necessarily capital bond.
I'm going with James on that. I'm
That's a
going
good
with James on that. I think he's right. You know, keep it in there for prioritization. And then maybe this traffic thing, we'll look at it to be funded out of the capital, or out of the city's excess
Let
budget.
them
Well,
figure it out.
and again, I mean, this is all advisory, we're just advising
That's right.
the city and recommendations on all these things. So my question was just, do we want to move smaller things out, or recommend all of them, and the city can go, yeah, no, yeah.
It's theirs anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
leave them all in.
I think that, it doesn't really matter if it's 800 and something thousand towards smaller stuff or bigger stuff. It's money that needs to be spent on things. So whether it's spent on streets or, the downtown and the facilities, it doesn't change the amount that we're borrowing and the interest and everything. So really, if you're comfortable with the amount, then the size of the project shouldn't necessarily make.
Right, I don't disagree, there was just a comment that
Sure.
we don't need to do that because it's small, we can cash flow it, and I thought, well, there's $2,290. So,
We got a deal up there. I think we just kind of stay the course at this point. I like what we got.
okay, so, with, Erica's motion passed in place for airport functional area, the first item, everything else that's on here, is there a motion to vote on all this as amended with the airport contingent upon matching funds?
Question,
Yes,
So
ma'am.
moved.
is this a bond recommendation or is this a recommendation for capital needs?
charge was to recommend a slate of capital needs projects to go before the city council as a potential bond. That's what's on that second tab and Roger's book.
I second John's motion.
Yeah, John made the motion to
Okay.
thank you in favor of all this.
Okay, move to second, is there discussion?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think we should put the skate park on there. It's only an extra $10 for when you break it down.
What now, what did you say?
The skate park on there. I just wanted to put that, it was an option up there, and I think that it's an important thing for the community.
This is my personal opinion. I think it just sort of, kind of almost is, kind of, I don't know if uppity is the right word, but it's a little affluent to me in ways. And I think it casts a different, direction maybe on the other things that we're needing that are a lot more needs-based rather than wants-based. That's just my opinion, for whatever it's worth.
Do you want to make an amendment to the motion?
We don't have a second.
She didn't make a motion.
No, I'm asking, there was a motion to vote on
Yeah, the whole thing.
that.
But we hadn't voted yet.
No, we haven't voted.
I just wanted
We're in the
to
discussion
open up
time,
that
and I believe
discussion.
certified parliamentarian, if we're in the discussion time on a motion, the motion is on the table to be amended, and we have to
Sure,
run it
it's your
first,
turn.
right? So that's why I was going.
I just wanted to open up that discussion
Okay,
for,
any other comments on skate park? I know you're a big skater, do you have any thoughts?
I prefer roller skates.
Roller skating, you can do that
You can
too.
do
right?
that.
Stay on the streets, John.
Okay, so you don't wanna, okay, so there's been a motion, there's been a second to adopt everything that's on the screen with the airport item amended contingent on matching funds.
Call the question.
All in favor?
All in favor?
you wanna explain it to Erica?
Now look, hey, look at this, we got 100%.
I trust my fellow team members.
Praise God.
I make a motion that our next meeting's in Honolulu.
Hey, you missed that.
Paid for by the city.
James said it again, he
Yeah,
didn't
put
hear
that on the
you.
bond.
What? He didn't hear you.
I think
And he
did.
would second the motion. No, he was talking to Erica.
Legitimate question?
This is probably premature, I suppose, maybe, but at some point,
We need to have a happy hour at my home. called
Yes,
Mosaic Boulevard.
absolutely.
but there's
Happy
gonna be
hours.
concern, or some may be concerned, even though I know Terry said no, but we've gotta sell this to some degree. We've gotta educate, maybe that's a better word, educate properly, just as we've been educated. And I don't know if this committee will function in that way, or if there'd be some other group that goes, but that's very critical, that the wrong opinions or wrong, comments don't gather steam. We've gotta set the course right for this. Get
Brandon,
mad.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually had a question about how that happens. Like, how as a group do we
Well, the
function in
council-
such a way?
We should rely on Philip's skill and tactic because he's really gonna,
Okay, so I, just on that point, I just want to refresh.
Good
Y'all
point.
all have a copy of this in your binder, this is the second tab. Our charge was to work with city staff and consultants on a broad category of capital needs and their project costs previously identified to determine additional needs or projects that should be further developed. We have the authority to recommend by a record vote a slate of capital projects to the city council for an election to authorize the issuance of bonds or other debt instruments. We just did that. The committee has the authority to recommend no bond election. The committee has the authority to make recommendations as to which needs or projects should be financed, thus determining the relative size of the bond, and we have the authority to make those recommendations. So that's the first part, I'm gonna come back to that in just a second. We also have been charged, you and I have to make a report. We'll send the report to y'all for review before we give it to the city council. should the committee recommend to the council, and should the council agree to call a bond election, the committee members are urged to develop and implement a program to ensure good and complete information is available to the voters to consider in making their decisions. So we don't have to go out and sell anything. We have to make sure that information is available to the voters.
And coming from leading a very large sales team in my current job, we need to sell this. So,
Yes.
yes, that's the charge, and I
Yes.
think there's a lot that we can all, I mean, I certainly, back in January, before I met most of you, would not have been equipped to have an educated conversation with my neighbors, or somebody at Java Jacks, or El Ranchero, you're finding my hot spots, about any of this. And now that we are educated, well, we weren't as educated, now we are, so how do we do that? And my question was for the city, there are things that you can't do, right? The city cannot represent and message out because of the legalities. So I think we do need to think about this, how we figure out how to take this to as many people as we can. I mean, I just made a lot of new friends, Roy, in your ward, where I was working for Cnac on a house. And I talked to a lot of people there. And so how do we meet people where they're at? Because asking people to come, I think we saw yesterday the output of that, and grateful for everybody that did come, but how do we as committee members, and we have to figure out what we want our role to be individually, how do we go meet people to help them understand and prepare for, and hopefully get the biggest election Nacogdoches has ever had, turnout, you know,
John
like
and I
that's the
have,
goal.
John and I have a recommendation, but
Yeah.
go ahead first.
That's it,
That's it.
I'm a
Okay,
sales girl, so.
Go ahead and make your recommendation.
Yeah, John.
Did you do that? Okay. I'm going to recommend that we appoint Erica as our marketing person
Yes.
for selling the bond. And then she can involve all of us, however that's possible. And that we, if you want to engage a marketing firm to help us do this, we have a really good one, I think several people can recommend. And then we will have to help you raise money to make that happen. I'm sure all of you have people who will be willing to help put a nickel on the table to make it work. That is, can I make that motion for this committee? Or
You can
is
make
that
it.
recommendation?
Can you
I'll
use the
make the
word
motion.
educate instead of sell?
Yeah, educate.
And then Erica,
Educate.
will you take that? Head of the education committee.
Yeah, yes.
I make the motion.
Look, everybody here has put so much work and effort. We've had so many discussions and the extra effort, like I'm looking at Philip and Barbara, you were intentional about going that extra step and then another step and then a third step, right? And I feel like, I'm committed to helping in whatever capacity is needed, so yes.
I don't think we need to vote on it. I think the chairman can make a.
Okay, you're just
second
gonna-
it. It might be better.
I may need some support. Can
I second that motion for Erica.
Okay.
I was gonna make that motion, but she beat me to
All
it.
opposed?
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, last thing before we leave, so I wanna make sure, so, let's just motion and do fun with, Robert's Rules of Order and such. Is there a motion to have a separate recommendation for the city to consider emergency vehicle bridge, just as a recommendation? Because that's gonna be our formal report. We're gonna give a formal report, here's bond stuff, here's some other stuff we really think y'all need to consider.
We need a motion.
So is there a motion to do that?
That we make a motion to do it, not include it in the bond.
No, it's not gonna be in the bond, it's gonna be in our report that, oh, by the way, y'all need to go get this stuff.
I was the, sort of the moderator at the Tiger Team, and that was the Tiger Team's recommendation to the committee.
James, you make the motion.
And I didn't see any opposition, therefore, I will make that motion
I'll
that
second.
we include that.
I'll
So
second
you
that.
wanna include it
No, not in the bond,
in the report?
in the report,
Okay, is
yeah.
there a second, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, great. And recommendation on on increasing street maintenance fees, on 1, 2, and 3, or do y'all want to do these independently?
I don't feel like I've had enough discussion or education or enlightenment.
Oh, wait a
about
minute,
that.
Steve,
Sorry,
Steve.
Can I suggest that because we're gonna pick this back up in September, that we still have utilities to talk about, which will give us a chance, Erica, to develop a program. By then, we'll be through the August, and we'll be ready to do it. And so, what I was gonna suggest is this is gonna be a result of the impacts from our water rate study that you haven't seen yet. So, before we vote to amend rates, because that's comes out on the water bill, and so maybe we could look at that in the fall.
Yeah, but I would still like, I think that as a committee, we need to recommend to the city council that they need to consider adjusting, at a minimum, consider adjusting.
Do you want to get this specific, I guess, is my question.
We don't need to get this specific, but I think we need to say something about increasing street maintenance fees on the water bill.
I think that's fine, John. We've already kind of-
Any recommendation we give is just, it's a recommendation, it's not binding.
To provide adequate street maintenance.
To provide adequate street maintenance, okay, so.
I don't like this, I don't support this. We didn't discuss this. In fact, we were talking
Yeah, I
about
had it. questions too, Maggie.
I'm concerned about making this recommendation because I don't feel like we've discussed it, we haven't looked at the impact it would have on, you know, the really low-income folks, and I think that we should follow Steve Bartlett's recommendation and punt on this one until we can have a more thorough examination.
Well, so the
Discussion.
way that I just written it up there, I think when Steve does their analysis, once they get the rate study, it's just increase street maintenance fee on water bill to provide adequate maintenance. It doesn't say by how much, it doesn't say who, it doesn't say how.
I want to,
But we can vote, that people don't want to vote on it, or pass it.
I want to speak in support of Maggie's comment. What we've done today is going to be published. It's going to be published in the Daily Sentinel, our recommendation. And when people look at what the bond recommendation is and then look at fee increases, I think the average opinion would be, look at this. They're coming at us from all directions for more money. We need to leave this out until we have more information.
Well, I have to justify the numbers too.
Yeah.
Right.
In other words, I can't just arbitrarily pick a number, so.
Okay, so
we
we
would
don't
love
do
to
that.
support globally to increase the fee. I think that's one.
At the right time.
Say
I think that's a good point.
Review street maintenance fees on water bills to provide adequate maintenance. Maybe that's right.
I don't think we need to bring it up.
Consider.
I think
Consider.
I think James is absolutely
John,
on target.
I just leave it off till September.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't,
Okay, so y'all.
Kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
let's just don't
Okay,
confuse.
so I'm gonna
We've
make a
earned the
motion.
right to do that.
I move that we leave all this off until September, is there a second?
I second.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Ah.
I'm done talking, anybody have anything else to say?
You did very
Yeah,
good.
Can you send that to us, the PowerPoint and this sheet here as a digital file?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Hey, can we talk about parks?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanna say
I'm
thank
going to
you
Hawaii.
to our chairs, our
Yes,
chairs.
absolutely.
You have opinions, maybe people.
I really want to say from the deepest spot of sincerity in my heart, I appreciate everyone on this committee's work, and I know that while we agree on all these things, I know that there are still some points of contention, and I'm glad that everyone has been able to work collegially, together, to get something done that's gonna help the city, and our work is not over, and Rhonda has an important announcement.
Is there a date for it?
Sometime in September.
See you.
See you.
The final